I OD'd, and my sister literally had to resuscitate me countless times. And
Wow.
so she broke my sternum at least 3 times, hammering on my chest to get me back to life.
Wow.
So the third time that happened, um, the third time that happened, and I got aware, and she was bawling out, crying, and she told me that the next time this happens, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you back, and she begged me.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Rooted in Christ podcast. My name is Eric Stevens. I'm the founder of Redwood Christian Ministries. Hope everyone out there is doing well today. With me on the show today is the host of Black Sheep Recovery Warfare podcast, my man, John Gallagher. Sir, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm blessed and highly favored. Thank you for having me, Eric.
First of all, thank you for your patience.
Yeah, the enemy didn't like what was going on today. I guess
No,
doing everything he could to stop this from happening.
he definitely did not. He was not excited about this at all. And I think for the first time ever, I'm live on Facebook on your pages right now. So this is a first for me.
And our YouTube. Mm-hmm.
Okay, there we go. And YouTube. So thank you for that. So if you are tuned in and listening, please subscribe to the Rooted in Christ podcast. We are Redwood Christian Ministries on YouTube. We are on all major podcast platforms. Please check us out. And John, thank you again for being here, man. I really do appreciate this. How's your day going?
Very well, man. Some big exciting things have been happening lately with the Black Sheep Recovery.
That's what's up. So let's not waste any time. Let's just dive right into it. So for anyone who may not know you or may not know your testimony, your life story, feel free to share any parts of that you want to with the audience. Let's just dive into, where you were and some of the things Jesus is doing in your life right now.
Absolutely. So I was born in Texas, and but grew up in South Jackson, Mississippi. Uh, I had a wonderful childhood. I had great parents. My father was a professional bass fisherman, and my mother ran the American Heart Association. And uh, I guess my addictions and all those things really started because I was very rebellious. And so my father, he also had a hunting and fishing television show, so he was gone all the time doing bass tournaments and recording and filming and doing all those things. So that gave me the opportunity to be very rebellious. And I was kind of a mama's boy, so she really just let me overlooked a lot of things. And so I guess when I was about 12 years old, I started drinking. My grandfather was an alcoholic. Most of the men in my family were. Like I said before, my father was gone all the time. So, I was off running with my uncle or my grandfather and all that from the time I was about 12 years old. And, driving my grandfather around Jackson, drinking and fishing with him and, doing all those things. And I think God bless, God rest my grandfather. So I think he was very country. He just looked at it as maybe a rite of passage, and I was with him, so maybe he felt like he could keep me safe and all that. But I think that's where my addictions really kind of started. From there, I guess around 15 years old, I started experimenting with other things. Some of I was some of the earliest things I really experimented with, obviously, would be weed. I never was into that whole scene, though. I just never took a liking to that. What I took a liking to was the pills, the ecstasy, the methamphetamine. And this was back in the 90s, too. So, drugs were a little bit different then. But that's where my addictions really started. And also had, throughout my life, I struggled with another addiction, with a porn addiction and a sex addiction. When I was about 9, 10 years old, I had an older sister and a younger sister. And when I guess it was around 9 years old, I had one of my older sister's friends practically lived with us. She would talk me into doing things that 9-year-olds or any child should be doing. And wasn't long after that, I guess I was around 12 or 13 years old, I discovered my uncle's big trunk of porn, so that, like I said, that was back in the 90s. So you got to imagine it wasn't like it is today, so
Right.
easily accessible. It was like VHS tapes and magazines. So that's where, I think that's where a lot of my problems began and started was, not just through drugs and alcohol, but through, exposure to sex and pornography at such a young age.
Wow. No, thank you for sharing. Thank you for your transparency with that. So that's where it all started. So then what came next? So obviously, um, I've heard a little bit about your story just from the few talks that we've had. So I know it continued to go deeper and deeper. So what came after that?
Well, growing up, I really wasn't happy in Mississippi. It was just kind of, I just didn't feel like I belonged in Mississippi. So at the time, when I was about 18 or 19, or 17, I dropped out of school and moved in with a friend of mine over in Clinton, and he had just graduated, and he had bought a house, and we immediately started selling drugs. I had a job at Papa John's, um, delivering pizza, and that's again back in the '90s. These were the pager days, so. I had a pretty cool setup. Like I would get a page, selling cocaine, ecstasy, and marijuana, and I would get a page. And when I'd go out to deliver a pizza, I would also, deliver party favors along with it. And so that I rocked on doing that till I was for about a year or so. And we, my best friend Jason, his mother, um, uh, God rest her soul, she just passed away recently. She was really good friends with a police officer, and I think she knew what was going on. She had an idea, and I was off in West Virginia working with my uncle, and uh, she had her cop buddy pull Jason over and let him know that the heat was on, that he was considered about like the number 3 on their list to watch. I was considered like number 7. They were on to us, and that if we didn't clean out, and change our lifestyles, then the hammer was fixing to fall. So, out of fear and wanting to get out of Mississippi, I joined the Navy, and
Hmm.
I had this desire to see the world, and going in the Navy, I was a hardcore coke addict, alcoholic, and I thought I was going in just to see the world and party, and that didn't happen. God really truly has a sense of humor, and with all that, so I would say probably 90% of people that join the Navy actually see the world. And I went to boot camp, and coming out of A school, I got my first set of orders, and they give you 3 options, and one of them was Yokosuka, Japan. One of them was Hawaii, and then the other one was Bremerton, Washington. So obviously, I chose my first choice was Yokosuka, Japan, and my second was Hawaii, and my third was Bremerton. Well, they gave me Bremerton, and so that put a really, it was land based. I spent about a year and a half in Bremerton, not happy, just miserable, and you know, and just spiraled into a party lifestyle where I wasn't even showing up to inspections and things like that. When I did, I was so bad hungover and reeked of alcohol, uniform, just in disheveled, not shaved, and they're real sticklers about all that. So didn't take long for them to exit me out of the United States military. I got thrown out after about a year and a half. But it was a medical discharge because of uh, my alcoholism and my drug addiction. So they considered it a medical discharge. So I didn't get an other than honorable or a dishonorable or anything like that. So that's where we went after that. So I don't know how many. You don't talk to too many sailors that get thrown out of the military for drinking, because I think a big part of the population is the alcohol in their party lifestyle when they're on liberty in other countries and other wherever. So went from there, left from there, and moved into my girlfriend's at the time, and that didn't work out very long. So I ended up in California, Northern California, Chico, California. Uh, a party, sex, drugs, rock and roll lifestyle, and it all kind of came tumbling around, and I was close to being homeless, and I ended up taking a 3.5 day Greyhound bus ride to Atlanta, where my parents had reconciled and were living at the time. And from there, for about, I'll just kind of jump, that for there to about 20 years, 25 years or so. It's just pretty much that lifestyle, just drugs and alcohol, and as much much as I could consume for about 25 years, and then ended up living in places like Tulsa, Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, uh, New Orleans, Atlanta. Just kind of living in, like that. I ended up working offshore. Um, and I met my who is now my best friend, and Jenny. Kind of settled down after I met her with the drugs, and for a period, and we were together for about 12 years, and I was working offshore for a while on the towboats, and we ended up moving back to Seattle. And so I was living in Seattle, and ended up getting this job in Alaska. And I guess right around about this time, I got introduced back to meth, on the West Coast. And so I was, I was spending 3 months at a time out in the Bering Sea as a chef. And I got to noticing that most of the fishermen weren't eating that much, and I thought it was because my food might have been terrible or something, but it wasn't that at all. It was, there was coke and methamphetamine on the boat. 'Cause these guys, they work. Sometimes they work 36 hours straight, and
Wow.
that's what they were doing. And so I brought that habit back home with me, and then started using pretty heavily on my time off. And I was making killer money, so I had the money to spend on the coke and the meth and the alcohol and the partying, and it just continued. And ultimately, we ended up back in Mississippi. And I do want to say this, along with the methamphetamine, that fuels a pornography addiction, and that's ultimately what pretty much ended my relationship with Jenny.
Hmm.
And uh, but yeah, so I ended up back in Mississippi, and got this menial job, construction, not making that much, and it just spiraled, man. I just got worse and worse. I was full of demons. Um, I developed this heart of stone. People, my my go-to my entire life, to cope with, like, grief or anger or anything, would be the drugs. And what I was doing was I was just numbing myself out. I didn't want to feel any of those things, and just didn't want to go through any of those things. And I developed this heart of stone. It just, I never showed any emotion toward any loss or anything like that. I was very close to. I got really close to my father. He was like more of a, my best friend, the last few years of his life. And then he got cancer. And I'd lived with him and my stepmother for a couple of years, and toward the end of his life. And so we worked together, and we spent the weekends together, cooking, having family gatherings and all that. And so we developed this really strong bond. It was like I said, it was like more of a best friend, relationship, because he was gone, most of my childhood, and he wasn't there. So we did develop that, and we got very close. And then he got sick, and he got cancer. And then the worse he got, the harder I turned to drugs. And then when he passed, I literally didn't really didn't have any emotion toward it, didn't have any feeling toward it. And I know now that it was that heart of stone that I developed, with all the drug use and the alcohol use. And and my mother, she fought cancer since I was about 15 or 16 years old. And like I said earlier, I was a straight up mama's boy. I was, out of my older sister, my younger sister, they used to pick on me for being her favorite. It was, and there toward the end, well, she fought cancer since I was about 16. It just kept coming back every 3 to 5 years or so. And my father, they had divorced ultimately. And, there really wasn't anybody there toward the end with her to take care of her but me. my little sister had gotten married. She was, very busy, and same with my older sister. And I was still with Jenny at the time. So I was working all day, and then I would go check on her in the afternoons. I'd spend time with her, and then I'd go home. I was I was selling a lot of things online, collectibles online at night, trying to get those posted, trying to make more money. I'm fueling a drug addiction, meth addiction all at the same time. Wasn't sleeping hardly at all. And, this is where, Jenny and I really took a turn because, she was feeling neglected from, all that I had going on, trying to take care of mom and, all those things. And then, um, on top of all the drugs and then, when she passed, same with my father, I just didn't feel, I just had no, I thought it was really strange that as close as we were and all that, I felt like I should have been, just break down, cry. I didn't even cry. I mean, just it was like that. And, but I was so far gone, and, um, like I said, I just developed this heart of stone. And then, all this time I'm, in and out of jail for misdemeanor things. It was just a upward battle. It's just downhill battle. And that's how I dealt with things. I dealt with things with drugs and chemicals and alcohol.
It's funny because when we have people come on the show and they start sharing their testimonies, there's guys like you, myself. I've had ASAP Preach on here, who I know that it's sin always keeps us longer than we want to stay, and it always costs us more than we're willing to pay. And some people look at that as this cliche thing, but it's true. If I had to pay for some of the things that I was doing, like right away, like right in that moment, maybe things would have changed quicker. But I'm grateful that God stepped in when He did. And I can honestly say, though I may not be proud of my past, and I'm sure you have a similar feeling of that. Though I may not be proud of it, I'm grateful for the fact that now on the other side of this, I can use parts of my testimony to help set other people free and be a light and a resource to them.
For sure. And, well, to understand where I'm at now, you really have to understand what I came out of.
Exactly.
And, I was, I was in, I was, I was involved in church, when I was a kid, and I've always believed in God, and I've always believed in Jesus Christ, and I've always known that He was actively pursuing me, and I just, again, with the heart of stone, when I was a teenager, it wasn't cool to go to church, and it wasn't cool to do those things, and so I gravitated toward the fun stuff, so I knew about Jesus, but I did not know Jesus. And I think it's important that your audience knows that and shout out to my brother Brad. He's taught me this. He's the director of my donor development with Black Sheep, and he says this in almost all of his sermons, and every time he goes and speaks, is that, do you know that right now that Jesus is actively pursuing you and pursuing a relationship with you? And I can look back on my life and tell you there are so many instances in all that darkness where He was literally sending people in my path to draw me out of that. And I kind of felt that, and I knew that, and I just ignored it. And like with Jenny, she's a very spirit filled woman, and so was her father, Ron. But he's they tried to, it was, especially with the porn addiction, like that kind of came out back then. Um, and he gave me some very wise words when we were living in Broken Arrow. He's like, your mind is like, it's almost like watching TV. You got to capture those thoughts, and when you have a thought like that, you have to change the channel. That it's instances like those where I knew that Jesus was sending people in my path, and I was just ignoring it, man. And um, so when um, ultimately, when it all came to a head, a couple of years after me and Jenny split up, um, I fell off on, so hard that I was actually an IV fentanyl, heroin, meth user full time. My little sister, I got out of jail. I was in Lamar County, and I just got my first felony. It was a possession charge, and the only place I had to go was to her. And at this point, I hadn't seen her in probably about 9 months to a year, something like that. And her and I were very close. She, we, everybody thought we were twins, man. And, she was my little sister. She was my world. She was my best friend. And so she was the only place I had to go to. And at this point in her life, I wasn't a needle user yet, but she was. And went to her, had to stay with her, and she had the conversation with me right away. She was like, "Listen, I know your personality, and you have the worst addictive personality of anybody I've ever met and known in my life, and I've known you all my life." She's like, "You cannot do this. You cannot." Like, well, she wasn't really literally talking about the methamphetamine as far as IV use, but she was like, you cannot shoot heroin. If you do, you're going to die. You're going to love it, and you're going to die," which was probably the worst thing she could have possibly said to me, because if you're going to tell me that I'm going to love something, and it's just going to make me want to do it even more. And not only that, but my entire life, wherever I was at, where I was living, whatever drugs were ready available in my face, that's what I was going to do, and I was going to try to do more than you.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, that's just how my personality was, and that's how I was. And so I guess it was probably for a couple of months or so before I even tried heroin or fentanyl, and it was behind her back. Well, she was literally there, but she didn't know I was about to do that, and I did, and I immediately OD'd. What I did, I'd snorted a very small line of fentanyl, and which before I did it, I was like, that little amount. I mean, I know me, I know the lines that I've done of methamphetamine and cocaine. I'm looking at this little tiny amount, and I didn't know anything about fentanyl at the time. And I tell you, the second it touched my nostril, I dropped, and my next memory was it was being in the emergency room, and what was happening was I was not with my body. I was hovering. I was literally in the emergency room, and I could see my body, and I could see the doctor, and I could see the two nurses, and I could hear everything was going on. And I can tell you right now that I know that if the Lord would have let me go right then, I would be burning in hell right now. Uh, but here's what happened: was the doctor had taken a look at me and looked at the nurse and said, "There's nothing we can do for him. He's dead. He's gone." And I know that this was the Lord that pricked her heart when she looked at him, and she grabbed him by the arm and said, "Let's just try the Narcan. It might work. Let's just at least just try." And thank God for that. Is as soon as they hit me with the Narcan, I got slammed back in my body. And at that point, I don't know if you've heard anybody talk about getting hit with Narcan, but it's not it's not very cool. It it's crazy. It's just this surge, and after that, I just started screaming for my sister because I didn't understand. I remembered what I'd done, and I thought, that the same thing might happen to her and the other people that were in that trap house. And so I was terrified that people were over there just dying. So I didn't have my phone, I didn't have anything, and they had cut my clothes off of me. And so I was freaking out, and I was trying to do everything I could to get out. They ultimately finally let me out, and let me go. And like I said, next thing I know, I'm trudging down Woodrow Wilson, downtown Jackson, in nothing but my boxers and a gown. And I walked for about half a mile to about 6 blocks to where I knew that my ex was and her boyfriend, and just terrified the whole time that my sister was already dead. And that wasn't, even though I remembered, that I had almost died, that wasn't enough to stop me. I literally went immediately and did a shot of meth, and got back to my sisters and told her everything that happened, and I just from there got worse and worse and worse, and ultimately learned the proper way to use heroin. But every time that there was feral fentanyl in the heroin, I OD'd, and my sister literally had to resuscitate me countless times. And so she broke my sternum at least 3 times. hammering on my chest to get me back to life.
Wow.
So the third time that happened, um, the third time that happened, and I got aware, and she was bawling out, crying, and she told me that the next time this happens, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get you back, and she begged me to go to rehab, and at first I was like, no, I can't do it because if I go to rehab, I just feel like I'll never see you again. I feel like you're going to die because you're dying too, and she was not going to go to rehab. She just refused. But she did tell me that um, she would detox with me off of the fentanyl and the heroin if I would go. And I guess it took about 2 weeks, and we helped each other detox. We're still using meth. You know, at the time, still shooting meth, and um, it wasn't that hard for me to detox of it, but watching her detox off it was insane. I heard noises come out of my sister that you wouldn't hear come out of a dying animal or dying human. It was like watching a horror movie. And it got so bad one night that I called an ambulance to come pick her up because I thought she was going to die. And some people do die from the detox. And they took her. They just sent her back out of there. And she came back. Like I said, I guess it took about 2 weeks. And I went to Region 8. Um, Before I continue with the story, I need to um, tell you about this guy that she was seeing at the time. He OD'd in front of us one time, and this was literally me watching my first overdose, and it was scary. And but her and I knew exactly what to do. We knew CPR. We learned it from our father. Um, he was actually literally on an episode of Rescue 911 for saving a man's life one time. It's really cool when we were very young. So we'd seen that episode 1,000 times, and so we knew exactly what to do, and we got him. We got him back, and so she had reconnected with him at this point. But right before I'd gone into rehab, and I told her that the only way I would go is if she would stay away from him, because I knew that if he came around, the heroin would come with it, the fentanyl would come with it, and she wouldn't be strong enough to be able to resist the temptation. And she agreed. And so I went to rehab, and I guess, and I was thriving. I was doing great. I was committed to the rehab, and I was gonna, continue it. I was actually set up for a secondary after, and I was gonna clean and go sober. I mean, I literally did the biggest shot of methamphetamine I could do walking into the rehab, knowing and had it in my mind this is going to be my last shot.
Hmm.
And so I got to the 27th day, and at that point, I hadn't heard from my sister in about a week, and it was around Christmas time. The last picture I got from her was of this Christmas tree, and she had set up. And when she would get very sick over the last year or two or whatever, I'd make these cool little boxes where I'd put a little junky, stupid items in it that didn't make any sense that she would, or whatever. But I would also put a bunch of her favorite things in there, like 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 her favorite candy or her favorite like a cool little lighter or something, and I'd put some cash in there. But there'd always be something cool at the bottom for just to make her feel better. But there would always be these little stupid things, like a Hot Wheel or something. I mean, just or a lug nut, and she would have to literally pick through this box, like, "Oh, thanks for the Hot Wheel." She literally on this Christmas tree. I didn't know that she had saved all those ridiculous things, and she had made Christmas ornaments out of them and hung them on that tree, and that was the last message I'd gotten from her. And then on the that whole week I just felt this sense of dread, and I didn't know what it was. And I called a couple of people to go put eyes on her and find her, told her I needed to talk to her. And then on the 27th day of my in rehab, the like, the director, he came and pulled me out of class. And when his eyes locked eyes with mine, I knew she was gone. And he pulled me out in the hallway and told me, he said, Jennifer has called up here to talk to you. And I knew right away. It's like, she's my sister, about my sister, isn't it? And, he said, yeah, I think it's about your sister, man. You need to go to my office and go make that call. So I did. And, I had this, that same numbness just wash over me like it did when my mother died and my father died. And before I even made the call, I knew immediately that I was fixing to go use. And, so I made the call, and, Jenny answered the phone. I said, it's Amanda, isn't it? And, she said, yeah, she's gone. And, I hung up the phone. We talked for a few minutes. I hung up the phone. I called a friend of mine to come pick me up. I had to wait about 2 hours. And they got there, and I instructed her on the phone to, go ahead and have a needle ready when you get here. And, I literally walked in this classroom and told these guys, about 30 other guys that were in the middle of their rehab. I was like, listen, I got to go handle my sister's death. I I'll be back. Y'all just, stay strong and, continue in your sobriety. And, swore to him I wasn't going to use or anything like that. And, as soon as she pulled up in that parking lot, I got in, and, I did the shot, and, had her drop me off at the hotel that, the last place my sister was seen. And, got to, I went straight to the streets of Jackson. I just, it's almost like I just welcomed, just settled into the darkness and just told it to come on. I just invited the demons in. Something in me broke, something in me snapped, and, I disassociated from reality, and gave up. And, I walked out, of rehab without a dime in my pocket. But, Amanda had a lot of friends, and, that's kind of what I surrounded myself with, was her, some, people, that, she, was close to in that life. And they kept me high. They kept me high. I guess, they knew that, this is how he was going to cope with it. And I just went from hotel to hotel. Uh, and I was approached by a couple of her friends. I didn't know how I was going to bury my sister, or how I was going to have her cremated or anything like that. She had two sons, Jacob and Caleb. And, Jacob was very young at the time. He'd 17. He might have just turned 18 at the time. I can't remember. And we had several conversations, and, I told him I'm going to handle it. I'm going to handle it. So, I was approached by two of Amanda's friends. I said, I don't know what to do. I have nothing, and they suggested, why don't you do a Facebook fundraiser? Amanda had a lot of friends. It'll raise some money, might get you enough money out of it to, get you somewhere to stay or whatever. And it ended up doing very well. Pretty good. It raised over $1,000. Same two friends came to me and said, look, we can turn this into $3,000 easily. Straw out the money. Let's get a couple ounces of dope. Let's sell it. And you'll have plenty of money to get back on your feet. And that's what we did. We got us a room over in Jackson. And, I know that they were being very manipulative with me, and they were using the situation, but I didn't know it was going to be to the extent. They told me they would handle all the dealing, all the selling. I wouldn't have to do any of it. What ended up happening was, every bit of it got done up. I never saw a dime back out of any of that money, and that money ran out really quick from the hotel room, and the dope went out very quick. It was just a big party to them. And, at that point, I had to explain to my nephew, what I'd done, because he was watching this Facebook fundraiser, and, and he knew that, how much it had raised, and he called me. He was like, well, are you ready to, they still have her body at the morgue. We need to do something about this. And I had to tell this teenager that, I had blown every bit of that money on dope in a hotel, and he was angry. That ruined that relationship between me and Jacob. However, I'll get to that story later, but, so from there, I literally went to the street. I was homeless. I'm homeless now. I'm staying in, I'm, just staying wherever I can. Some nights I'm, behind a building, hanging out with other homeless people. Um, staying up for days on end, just wandering the streets of Jackson. Very dangerous areas. A lot of the streets I was wandering down and through, JPD wouldn't answer calls to if they were called 911, and God protected me through all of that. You know, continued ODing here and there, but throughout all of this, I knew. I mean, it's almost like a veil started to drop, and the Lord started showing me things. And one thing He did, I was walking around, and I was in the Meadowbrook area, and I turned down this street, and all of a sudden, these houses on my left and my right, they started looking exactly like houses that I grew up in, where all my life, and it'd be like my grandmother, my grandfather's house. I mean, it was literally in my mind, it was the house, and looked to my left, and there was a house on Heatherwood. To my right, there was a house on Terra Drive, and ultimately, I got to this one house, and it was a house I didn't recognize, and I remember it was a cloudy day, and there was this big, beautiful tree in the backyard, and the sun peeked out and shined right on this tree, and it turned this tree silver from top to bottom, glowing, and I could literally see into the backyard, and then at the bottom of the tree, um, I could see my sister, my little sister, and I know that what God was showing me, that she was good, she was fine, she was with Him. And He was showing me that for a reason, and He was doing things like that, to draw me to Him, draw me near to Him, and I was just very angry with God at this point in my life, very bitter, um, because of all the loss, just not understanding how all this could happen to me in such a short period of time. You got to understand that in less than 3 years, I say I, because I did all of this. I'm take a full accountability for everything I've done. I know I'd ruined every relationship that I'd built with my family. My nieces, my nephews, my daughter. I ruined that relationship with her. My best friend Jenny, who I was with for 12 years, and my actions. It was my choice, and I knew what I was capable of. For using those drugs, and so I hold myself very accountable for all that and my actions after that. But I'd burned every bridge with not just her but her children. Uh, like I said, my nieces and my nephews, and my close friends. I mean, I just didn't care. And at this point, I was just ready to die. I was just ready to get up and die, and didn't understand why He was letting me live through all these overdoses. And um, yeah, so I wandered around Jackson for about 9 months or so, like that. Um, Ultimately, I got back in touch with Jenny. She was concerned about me. I think in my mind, one thing that I had in my mind was like, and she had moved on. She was with somebody else at this point. I'm still, to this day. Um, at this point, we've been broken up for about 5 years, I think, something like that. At this particular point, 4 or 5 years. But she started. I guess the way she tells it, and I'd rather her tell it, but the Holy Spirit spoke to her and told her to be obedient, that I needed her help, and that she needed to help me. And at first, she was not open to that.
Right.
She did not do it right away. The forgiveness didn't come right away, but ultimately it did. And thank the Lord that it did. That He put that on her heart, because without her first initial, response, to ultimately help me, none of this would have happened. I most certainly would probably be dead now. And so we ultimately, reconnected. She would come pick me up, and she would take me to eat. She would feed me, and she'd check on me. She would if she would take me in for a few days here and there at a time, but I would ultimately wreck that. In my mind, I'm like, oh, we're getting back together. I just that's the way I saw things. I was high. I was still using, and So I would end up having to leave, and but she never gave up, and she would make sure that she'd come pick up my laundry for me, and she'd go do it. She was very good to me, and so now we are. Um, I guess about 9 months into all that, um, I started listening to continued. I say started. I've been listening to the lies of the enemy all my life, but it got very intensified, and I think that the lies of the enemy started coming at me really hard because the enemy knew that the Lord was really pursuing me hardcore at this point, trying to pull me out of this darkness. So I started flirting with the idea of suicide, and I felt like my life was already over. I felt like I was just a walking zombie. Um, it was just a matter of time. I was wasting away. My mind was literally wasting away. At this point, I thought I was being gang stalked. Um, Sometimes I thought I was in a video game. Sometimes I thought I was on a game show. It was crazy. I mean, the realities that I was living in that was in front of me, it was insane. It was insanity. It's just the only way to explain it. Um, it was all fueled by drugs and the lies of the enemy. And then I started flirting with the idea of suicide. And I was staying at the same friend's house that picked me up from rehab, and which at the time was cool for me because she always paid for all my drugs. She was my go-to. I'm sure it's out of pity, whatever. But she took me to her house, and she had this patch of woods in her backyard, and I would go out there, you know, um, crazy high, and the shadow people would come. I mean, the things I would see out there were just crazy. But and again, at the same time, God would shine light on that and show me other things. Like I would literally see in tree trunks like the word Jesus or I am. And then
Mhm.
you have to understand that at this point I haven't opened a Bible and I didn't know anything about the Bible. It's
Right.
I would see I mean the things I would see like I could literally see the Lord trying to break through in that darkness and shine light on it. And then again I would just you know sit in the darkness and just ignore it. Like literally ignoring this call to salvation, uh, and not open myself to the love, but so I found this big oak tree and it was dead. There was this big hole in the side of it, and I could literally crawl into this oak tree. And it was so hollowed out, I could literally stand up in it. And you got to understand, I'm like 5'11. I'm kind of a tall dude. And it was inside this tree that I decided that I was going to commit suicide. I was going to go get, I was going to go get me some fentanyl. I was going to crawl in this tree. I was going to do the shot, and there would be no choice but it to be over with because nobody would be there to save me. And but before I did that, things got really weird in that area. I started seeing crazy things, and
Mhm.
at the time, Jenny was in Florida, and I called her and I told her what was going on. I didn't mention anything about suicide, but I did tell her the things I was witnessing. I was seeing them, and I was seeing them. I was telling her, "Look, I know God is talking to me, and I don't know how. I don't know what to do." And I told her how He was talking to me, and she said, "Let me let you talk to my dad." And I was talking to him. He said, "How do you know that all of that? What makes you think that all of that is from God?" And I told him, I was like, "You don't understand the things that I'm seeing, or I was reaching. It's like I wanted to understand what's happening because I don't feel like uh, all my life and all these hallucinogenic drugs that I've done, I'd never experienced things like that. Of what I was seeing and what I was witnessing, and so I was trying to decipher if this was the drugs or if it was of God. And so he said, well, and I'm standing in a carport where my friend in this carport had taken multiple different sticks of different colored chalks and wrote all these things on the carport, like names and all these other things. And he said, how do you know that this is coming from the great I am? And as he said that, literally on the concrete right there, the words out of all this chalk came together and formed I am.
Hmm.
And then I started seeing it, looking around, seeing it in the bark of the trees. I mean, it was, so I was trying to decipher if this was of God or if this was of the drugs. So I ended up getting off the phone with him and was very confused, frazzled. I'd been up for a while, days. And I went to my friend and I had her take me to uh, drop me off at the storage unit over where Jenny was they still had a place over there and where a lot of my stuff was. And I was going to write 2 letters. I was going to write one to her and I was going to write one to Bailey, my daughter. And at this point, I hadn't seen Bailey in about 3 years. But, my lifestyle had literally come out in the open and, she didn't want nothing to do with that, obviously. And her mother wouldn't let her anyway. Her mother had literally put a no contact order on me.
Hmm.
And so I was going to write 2 letters. And I was going to write one to her and I was going to write one to Jenny. And I was just going to tell them that, I'm leaving the state. Bailey, you're better off without me. Don't look for me. I'm good. Just whatever. And it was all just going to be lies, literally, just a bunch of lies. Because in my mind, I was going to be inside of a tree dead and nobody would ever find me unless they ever cleared that land and come across my remains. And so I set up the deal and I'm on my way. We're on our way. And she stops at this gas station. And I'm in the gas station about to get me something to drink or something. There's this young lady in front of me. And she reminded me so much so of my daughter. She looked just like her. She was the same height, same build, probably close to the same age, and all these things. And she had struck up a conversation with me, started cutting up with me, and I was like, maybe this is some kind of closure that God's given me since I can't say goodbye to my daughter, And so she pays her stuff and walks out, and I'm about to pay for my stuff, and I noticed this little backpack sitting right beside the front of the counter, and I just happened to look over my shoulder, and that young lady was digging through her car looking for something. And I thought it might have been the backpack. So I take the backpack out there and ask her if it belonged to her, and she said no. And we, start talking again. At this point, my friend is, paid out her stuff, and she's in the car, and she's got somewhere she's got to be. So she was literally just going to drop me off and then come back pick me up. But so me being homeless, I've always got backpacks. So I forgot all entirely together that this backpack didn't belong to me. So I hop off in the car and we go about our way, and then I realize I have it. And she's like, "We'll just drop it off on the way back after I pick you up." And I was like, "Okay." So I get to the storage unit. She drops me off, and I never look in the backpack. I set the backpack down in front of my storage unit, and I guess within 30 minutes, I'm surrounded by cops. Like four cruisers show up, Pearl Police and Richmond Police, and they get out, guns drawn down on me, like I done robbed a bank, killed somebody. I didn't know what was going on. I was high out of my mind. And Brian Ellis, Detective Brian Ellis, he ran up on me and he's get on the ground, all those things. And I'd known this guy for a long time. I used to work with his wife. And I'd had a few, gets deeper into it, but I'd had a few run-ins with him over the past couple months leading up to this. Like he literally, I locked myself into a hotel room in Pearl, not in a hotel room, in a bathroom in the lobby of a hotel because I had nowhere to be, nowhere to go. And he literally had to pry into the bathroom to get me out of there. And he put me in his car and took me to to Hines County, dropped me off, told me, "Do not come back in Pearl." But it was like that. We had like 3 run-ins like that. So he was just fed up with my garbage, And so they arrest me, and he puts me in the car, and he's like, "Man, I don't know what happened to you. What has happened to you? What has caused?" I mean, like I said, he'd known me for a long time. He'd seen me when I had great jobs and doing good and all these things, and now I'm just a homeless derelict wandering the streets of Pearl. I'm sure it blew his mind. But at the same time, this just fueled my anger toward God, because I knew that God had every bit of everything to do with this divine encounter, you know. And had it not been for that, then I would have made it back to the tree, and I would have crawled in it and died. And so I'm on my way to they're transporting me to Richland Police Department, and I'm just full of rage, full of anger, and they get me into the holding cell, and I just completely lose my mind, and I start screaming things at the Creator that you should never say. I mean, just worse than what Lieutenant Dan was screaming on Forrest Gump. And then he showed up in the cell, and the presence was so powerful that it thrust me to my knees, and he made himself known right then and there. And then my next thing I know, my nose was to the concrete, and I felt this presence wrap around me like a big hug, And then I felt this flood come through every part of me, every particle, everything that makes me up, and directly into my heart. And what I didn't know at the time, what I was experiencing was deliverance, I think.